Someone had to say it, honey. That was my mother, on her feet with her champagne up, 4 seconds after my sister told 120 of my wedding guests that I had faked a miscarriage for attention. My sister was my maid of honor. She had the microphone because I handed it to her. She said the word faked again, slower, so the back tables would catch it. My father clapped. Not politely. He clapped the way a man claps for a horse he bet on. I didn't answer her. I stood there in a dress I was still paying off, and I let the room finish laughing. I'm Hadley Prentice. I'm 30. I lost my baby at 8 weeks, on a bathroom floor at 2 a.m. And the thing I couldn't stop turning over, standing there, was that my mother didn't look surprised. Before I take you back, do me one favor. If you're the kind of person who stays up for a story like this, hit like and subscribe. It costs you nothing, and it decides whether a story like mine gets heard at all. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. I like knowing who's out there in the dark with me. Hadley Prentice, 30 years old, digital archivist at a university library. That ballroom wasn't the story. The ballroom was the middle of the story, and I didn't know it yet. To understand what my mother was really protecting when she came out of that chair, you have to go back to February. To a bathroom in a rented duplex in Heartline, Ohio. But first, my family. It won't take long. It never does. My mother is Carol Prentice. She's 61. For 29 years, she was the front office secretary at Heartline Middle School, and if you've never met a woman like her, let me explain what that job actually is. She didn't teach. She didn't grade. She controlled the calendar. She decided which day the concert happened, which day the 8th graders got their pictures taken, which day a mother could come in and see the principal about her son. Nobody in that building could do anything until Carol found a slot for it. She retired in 2019. They gave her a plaque and a sheet cake, and for 6 months she was the unhappiest woman in Ohio because there was nothing left to schedule. Then she started scheduling us. My father is Wayne, 63, 3-truck heating and air company, an elk since before I was born, and those 2 facts explain everything he has ever done. Wayne's whole life runs on being the guy the other guys ask. He isn't cruel. He's worse than cruel. He's a man who will hand you to a wolf if the wolf is standing where his friends can see it. And then there's Meredith, my sister, 34, the pretty one who didn't finish things. 2 semesters of nursing school. A wedding called off in 2016, 3 weeks out, deposits gone. A run of medical billing jobs that lasted a year each. And then, 4 years ago, the front desk at Heartline Women's Health. The OB/GYN practice out on Delmar Road. The one every woman in my family has used since my mother was young. Records and reception. Check-in, check-out, insurance, scanning. She wore a lanyard. She was genuinely good at it. And my mother told people her daughter worked at a doctor's office, in a tone that let you believe it was a different job than it was. Now here's what I do. Hold on to this one because it's the only weapon I ever had. When a box of somebody's papers comes into my library, letters, ledgers, photographs, a dead professor's slides, my job isn't to read them. My job is to prove them. Where did this come from? Who touched it? What machine made it and when? And what did that machine stamp on it that the person holding it never noticed? Everything a system makes carries a receipt. Every scanned page has a header. Every photograph out of a hospital machine has a strip along the bottom with a number in it. A number that belongs to one exam, one patient, one day, forever. That's not a label somebody typed. That's the machine talking to itself. Ordinary people crop the top of an image. The top is where the name is, the birth date, the date. Everybody knows to cut the top. Nobody reads the bottom. I've said that sentence to 8 years of undergraduates until it stopped meaning anything to me. I found out in June what it means, February 6th. Elliot and I had been trying for 11 months. Elliot Vance, 33, high school band director, a man who cries at car commercials and can silence 40 teenagers with one look. I took the test at 6 a.m. and sat on the edge of the tub reading it 3 times, and then I stood over him while he slept until he opened his eyes and got scared. Then he laughed. Then he cried. Then he said, Okay, who do we tell? Nobody, I said. That isn't paranoia. That's the rule. In this country, you don't say anything until 12 weeks. Every website, every nurse, every friend who's been through it tells you the same thing. Wait until 12. Because before 12, anything can happen, and if it happens, you don't want to untell 100 people. That rule is supposed to protect you. Remember that. It's supposed to be a kindness. We had a wedding on the calendar for October 3rd, and I had a binder for it, because of course I did. Contracts, invoices, deposit receipts, filed and labeled in my own handwriting, which is a thing my family made fun of at Christmas for years. That binder is the reason I'm able to tell you this story at all. I didn't know that yet either. For 6 weeks it was ours, just Elliot's and mine. I have never been that happy and that quiet at the same time. March 17th, Heartline Women's Health, Delmar Road, 10:15 in the morning, the dating scan. I walked past the front desk and my sister wasn't at it. Tuesdays, she worked the back, scanning. I remember being relieved and then ashamed of being relieved, and then not thinking about it again for 3 months. The tech's name was Denise. Big, warm, cold gel, that little apologetic laugh they all have. 8 weeks and 1 day. A heartbeat like a horse running in another room, and Denise turned the monitor so I could see it, and I made a sound I have never made before or since. She printed the picture. While the printer was chewing it out, she typed something into the corner of the image. They do that. It's a keepsake thing. They've done it 1,000 times. And she slid the printout across the counter in a little paper sleeve and said, "Congratulations, Mom." I put it in my bag. That night I put it in an envelope in my nightstand drawer. I did not take it out again for 82 days. March 24th, a Tuesday. It started at 7 in the evening with a cramp I told myself was nothing, and by 8:30 it was not nothing. I called the after-hours nurse line at 8:36. I know the exact minute because it's on my phone bill and because I have since read it in 3 different documents written by 3 people who never met each other. She asked how far along. She asked if I was soaking through a pad in an hour. She said the words, "threatened miscarriage," which is the worst phrase in the English language because it has hope in it. She told me to come in if it got worse. Then she said, "I'm putting a note in your chart, honey." I sat on the closed lid of the toilet with my hands shaking and I did not call my mother. Everything after this depends on that. I did not call my mother. I did not call my sister. I didn't text anyone. Elliot was at a marching band fundraiser in the next county, and I hadn't even called him yet because I was still telling myself it was nothing. At 9:14, my phone lit up on the sink. "Meredith, don't make this a whole thing. You weren't even far enough along to tell anybody. If you go crying to Mom tonight, everyone is going to know you did it for the attention." I read it 4 times. I remember the cold coming up through the tile into my feet. I had never told my sister I was pregnant. I had never told anyone I was pregnant. There were 2 people on this earth who knew, and one of them was me, and the other one was asleep in a folding chair in a school cafeteria 40 minutes away. I typed, "What are you talking about?" She didn't answer. She never answered. At 2:04 the next morning, it stopped being a threat and became a thing that had already happened. I'm not going to describe it. You either know or you're lucky. It was March 25th. It was a bathroom floor. It took a long time. Elliot got home at 1, and by 2 he was sitting on the tile behind me with his arms around my ribs, saying my name over and over like it was a rope. We went to the emergency room at Riverbend Memorial at 4 in the morning. They were kind. They were so kind it made it worse. A doctor with a gray beard said the word chemical, then stopped himself and said, No, you were further than that. I'm sorry." They gave us a printed discharge summary, 4 pages. My name at the top of every one. I filed it. Of course I filed it in a folder, in my own handwriting. Here's the part nobody warns you about. Nobody sent flowers. There's no casserole for this, no service, no announcement, no card in the rack at the grocery store that says the right thing. When somebody dies, this country knows exactly what to do. There's a whole machine for it, and the machine shows up at your door carrying a ham. When you lose a baby at 8 weeks, there is nothing. You go back to work on Monday, and a woman in the break room asks if you got a haircut. They call it hidden grief. I looked it up at 3 in the morning like a lunatic, because that's what I do. Most women wait more than a year before they tell a soul. A lot of them wait more than 4. So I told no one. Statistically, it was the most normal thing about me. Nobody sent flowers. One person sent a text. It had come 4 days before on the night itself, and it told me not to make it a whole thing. March 28th. My mother called on a Saturday morning, breathless with good news. We hadn't spoken in 11 days. Hadley. The Lindemeer had a cancellation. May 16th. The ballroom, honey, the big one. And they'll honor the old rate if we move now. I said we were booked for October. She said October was 6 months away and anything can happen in 6 months. She said Grandma Ruth was slipping, and did I want my grandmother at my wedding or a nice photograph of an empty chair. She said the dress fits me now. She used the voice. The front office voice, the one that has already decided and is only calling to inform you. And I was 4 days out from the worst night of my life, and I had told her nothing, and I did not have one single thing left in me to fight with. So I said yes. And my mother said, "Oh, thank God, I'll call them right now," and hung up before I could take it back. She said a room had opened up. I remember thinking, with the flat kind of humor you get when you haven't slept in 3 days, things always open up for my mother. April 11th, Sunday dinner at my parents' house on Bickford Street. I almost didn't go. I'd been coming home from work and sitting in the car in my own driveway for 20 minutes before I could make myself walk inside, and the last thing I wanted was pot roast and my mother's opinions on centerpieces. Meredith stood up before the plates were down. She had a card in her hand. She has never once in her life brought a card to anything. "I've been waiting to tell you all," she said, and her voice broke on it. "She's good, she's really good. I'm pregnant." My mother screamed, an actual scream, the kind you hear at a game. My father put his face in his napkin and cried, and I had seen my father cry twice in my life, at 2 funerals. Aunt Deirdre, my mother's older sister, came around the table on her bad hip to get to her, and my mother held Meredith's face in both hands and said, "Finally, finally, finally." Finally. Meredith said she was 9 weeks, due November 15th. She'd known a while and hadn't wanted to jinx it. She said the 12-week thing, you know. You have to wait. I sat there with my hands in my lap and my mouth doing the shape of a smile, and everything inside me was one long flat tone, like a monitor. 18 days. It had been 18 days. And Meredith looked at me across the table. I was the only one still sitting. And she said kindly in front of everyone, "Hadley, don't make that face. It's happening to somebody at least." Everybody laughed, warmly. It was a warm laugh. I said congratulations, and I meant it. That's the part that still gets me at 2 in the morning. I meant it. April was the family's month. It certainly wasn't mine. My father wrote a check for $18,400 to turn Meredith's spare room into a nursery. I know the number because he said the number out loud at the Elks Lodge fish fry to men I'd known since I was 6. Wayne Prentice does not spend money quietly. Wayne Prentice spends money the way other men buy billboards. My mother started a group text. She named it Baby Countdown. 22 people in it. She posted in that chat every single day. Nursery paint, a mobile shaped like hot air balloons, a poll about names, and every so often, 216 days, like it was a rocket launch. I didn't leave it. Leaving would have been a statement, and I could already hear her. She left the baby chat, Deirdre. She left it. Can you imagine? So I stayed in the chat about my sister's baby for 5 weeks and said nothing, and the whole time there was an envelope in my nightstand drawer I could not open. That's the thing about grief like this. It doesn't make you loud. It makes you a very quiet, very agreeable woman who does not look directly at anything. May 2nd, Saturday, 6:41 in the evening, baby countdown. Meredith posted a photograph and 2 words. 12 weeks! 22 people lost their minds for an hour and a half. My father wrote, "That's my grandbaby," in all caps with no apostrophe, which is the most Wayne Prentice sentence in the English language. I looked at my phone on the couch and saw a gray thumbnail, and I put the phone face down on the cushion, and Elliot said, "You okay?" And I said, "Yeah." And I didn't open it. It was an 1.5 inches of gray on a screen, and I couldn't have told you one thing about it. 70 days later, my father would read that sentence of his again in a bright room with his hands shaking. May 3rd, the last Sunday dinner before my wedding, and that's the day it went up on the refrigerator. Framed. My mother had it framed. Not one of those magnetic plastic sleeves, an actual frame. Black wood, white matte, and she had put a magnet strip on the back so it could hang on the freezer door like a diploma. Meredith's 12-week scan. Aunt Deirdre stood in front of that refrigerator with her hand over her mouth and cried. My father stood behind her with his hands on his hips, like a man looking at a truck he was proud of. My mother said, "Look at that profile. That's a Prentice nose. Wayne, that is your mother's nose." At 8 weeks, there is no profile and there is no nose. Nobody in that kitchen had ever seen a scan that wasn't an inch wide on a phone, and they saw a nose because Carol told them one was there, which has always been enough. And they all stood there in a half circle in the kitchen, in front of the freezer door, the way people stand in front of a casket. I went out to the garage. I stood between my father's tool chest and a stack of paint cans with my palms flat on the workbench, and I breathed. It wasn't jealousy. I need you to know that. It was that I had a photograph of a heartbeat in an envelope in my nightstand that I hadn't been able to touch in 6 weeks, and there was one on the refrigerator with a light shining on it. I couldn't look at it, so I didn't. Through the door, I heard my mother say, in the voice she uses when she thinks a door is thicker than it is, "She's making it about herself again." May 11th, Monday, 5 days before my wedding. The mail had been coming since March. That's the thing they don't fix. The system doesn't know. It just keeps running. A card from the practice. Your 12-week appointment is coming up. A postcard about a class. A glossy brochure from a formula company that had bought my address from somebody. And a reminder in a friendly font with a stork on it. Elliot brought in the mail on Monday, and I watched his face change, and I said, "Give it to me." And he said, "Hadley." And I said, "Give it to me." So I called the practice Monday afternoon, just after 4. I got a woman, not my sister, some other woman. And I said, as evenly as I have ever said anything, "I need you to take me off the recall list. I'm not pregnant anymore. The letters keep coming." There was a pause, and then she was so gentle. She said, "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. Let me note the account." Let me note the account. That was it. That was the whole call. It took 90 seconds. I hung up and I went back to work, and I felt, for the first time in 6 weeks, like I had done one competent thing, like I had closed one door. It was a Monday. The wedding was Saturday, May 15th. The rehearsal dinner in the private room at a steakhouse off the interstate. 40 people. My father buying rounds for everyone, including a table that wasn't with us. 2 things happened that night that I filed away and did not look at for 36 days. The first, Meredith was drinking club soda with lime and making a whole show of it, and she had a bump. 14 weeks. It was there. I remember registering it the way you register weather. The second, at some point I went looking for my mother, and I found the 2 of them in the hallway by the restrooms, and my mother had an index card in her hand, and Meredith was reading it, and when I came around the corner, my mother folded the card into her palm and said, "Toast practice. Don't you dare look." And I laughed. I actually laughed. I said, "Just don't tell the one about the trampoline." So when I saw my mother handing my sister an index card in a hallway, I thought, that's sweet. That's my mother being my mother. Hold that image exactly where it is. In 5 weeks, I'm going to pick it up again, and it's going to be a different object entirely. May 16th, my wedding day. It rained in the morning and stopped by 11, which my mother declared a sign. The Lindenmere is a hotel downtown, 60 years old, gold and cream, a ballroom with chandeliers the size of cars, 120 people. The dress was $2,200, and I had 11 months left on it, and I loved that dress. I'd stood in a fitting room in March in a body that had just stopped being 2 people, and I looked at myself and thought, okay, something good is still coming. We'd paid $400 extra for the raw video files. Elliot fought me on it. He said, "Nobody watches the raw." I said, "I do. That's literally my job." He said, "You're going to file your own wedding." I said, "Watch me." Remember that. $400. It's going to matter more than the dress. Dinner ran late. Toasts were supposed to start at 8, and it was 8:20, and the DJ, a guy named Rick with a headset and a clipboard, came over and said we needed to tighten it up. 90 seconds a person, then he'd bring the music up. That's not rude. That's the job. Every wedding in America runs on a guy with a clipboard who cuts people off. Then my sister put her hand out for the microphone, and I gave it to her. Not because I'm ashamed of that, because it's true, and the truth is the only thing I've got. I handed my sister the microphone. She started the way you're supposed to. She was funny. She told the trampoline story. She said I'd read the encyclopedia in the bathtub, which is true. She said Elliot was the first boyfriend of mine she hadn't wanted to key the car of, and the room laughed, and I laughed, and my throat was loose and warm, and I was so glad she was up there. And then she took a breath and changed her voice. "But I have to say something real," she said, "because I love my sister, and because somebody has to." Somebody has to. That's a door opening. In this family, that's a door opening. This spring, my sister told our family she'd lost a baby. The room went still the way a room does. 120 people arranging their faces. I had not told our family anything. I had told our family nothing. I want to say that here because I couldn't say it there. And we grieved with her, Meredith said. We did. And then I found out she'd never been to a doctor. Nobody ever saw a test. Nobody ever saw a scan. There was nothing. There was never anything. She let it sit. My sister faked a miscarriage. For attention. She faked it, she said. And she said it slow, so the back tables would catch it. Because I was pregnant and the wedding wasn't enough. Somebody at table 9 said, "Oh my God," out loud. There was a noise in that room I've never heard anywhere else. 120 people inhaling. Here's why it worked. It worked because it's a real thing. That accusation isn't from Mars. Every person in that ballroom had read a story that year about a woman who faked a whole pregnancy with a silicone belly and a gender reveal and then announced the baby died. It's on the news. There's a shape in people's heads for it now, and my sister didn't have to build the shape. She only had to point at me and say the word, and every head in that room already had a picture loaded. And the worst part, the part that made it land like a hammer, is that everything she said was technically true. Nobody had seen a test. Nobody had seen a scan. I had followed the rule that's supposed to be a kindness. I waited until 12 weeks like a good girl, and I never got to 12 weeks, so there was nobody to be my witness. The rule protected her, not me. Then my mother stood up. Champagne up, on her feet. 4 seconds. I counted them later, and I'll tell you exactly how. After the word faked. Someone had to say it, honey. To the room, not to me. She said it to the room in her front office voice, the one that has already decided and is only informing you. And my father clapped. He clapped, and then 2 more people clapped, because that's what human beings do when somebody with authority claps. It didn't spread. It didn't need to. 8 or 9 people applauded at my wedding while my sister called me a liar and my mother certified it, and everybody else watched. Americans do not get involved in other people's family business. They get their phones out. They don't stand up. I don't hate those 8 or 9 people. They were following my mother, the way everybody in that building always had. That was the point. I walked up there, my feet hurt. Of everything in that ballroom, that's what I remember. Meredith handed me this microphone. That's the part people don't believe. She was that certain. She'd already won, and she wanted the room to see her be generous. I said, "I want to read something." And I opened my phone, and I found the message from March 24th, and I read it out loud into 120 people. Don't make this a whole thing. You weren't even far enough along to tell anybody. If you go crying to Mom tonight, everyone is going to know you did it for the attention. I said, my sister sent me that on the night I lost my baby, and I watched it not work. Because, and I understood this half a second too late, that text does not sound like proof. It sounds like a fight. It sounds exactly like what a sister says to a sister who's making a scene. Half that room heard it as me confirming her story. My cousin's wife nodded. The only person in that whole ballroom who understood what I'd just done was my mother. She came out of her chair. Not up, out. She was already talking before she had her balance, and her glass went over on the tablecloth, and I have never in 30 years heard my mother make that sound. Read what she wrote, she said, not when she wrote it. The room did not know what that meant. I'm telling you, 118 people in that ballroom heard a mother scolding a daughter for airing dirty laundry, and that's all they heard. And honestly, it made her look loyal. 2 people knew what it meant. I wasn't one of them. I stood there with the microphone in my hand and my mouth open, and I looked at my mother, and I thought with total clarity, why do you care about when? And then Rick brought the music up. He wasn't being cruel either. He'd been told 90 seconds. He was 30 seconds past on a hard-out ballroom. A woman had knocked over a glass, and his entire job is to make the bad things stop. So he did his job. The first 8 bars of a song I will never be able to hear again came up over the top of me, and the wedding coordinator put 2 fingers on my elbow, gently, the way you'd guide a drunk, and said, "Let's get you some air, hun." That's how it ended, not with a bang, with a fade. They cut my microphone at my own wedding. I want to tell you that I left. I didn't leave. I did what women in my family have done for 4 generations. I went to the bathroom, I fixed my face, and I came back out and ate cake with 120 people who had just watched my sister do that to me and had decided, more or less unanimously, to pretend the last 4 minutes hadn't been in the program. That's what nobody tells you about public humiliation. It doesn't end the party. The party keeps going. There's a dessert course. A man I'd never met told me the beef was excellent. My uncle danced with my mother. Elliot didn't leave my side for 2 hours. His face was gray. At one point he said, "Do you want me to burn it down? Say the word." I said, "Not tonight." He said, "Hadley." I said, "Not tonight." We left at 9:40 from my own wedding. In the parking garage on level 3, under those lights that make everybody look dead, I sat sideways in the passenger seat with my feet on the concrete and my dress in a heap and my shoes in my hand. Elliot stood in the open door and he said, "What did she mean?" I said, "What?" He said, "Your mother. Read what she wrote, not when she wrote it. What does that mean? Why does she care what time it was?" And I sat in that parking garage in a $2,200 dress, and I realized I had no idea. But my mother did. My mother knew exactly what time it was. The first 72 hours were the worst of my adult life, and I've told you what March was like, so understand what I'm saying. In March, I lost something. In May, I lost the story of it. There's a difference, and the second one is louder. Sunday, my phone rang 11 times. My mother left one voicemail. I've kept it. It's 19 seconds, and here's all of it. "Well, I hope you're proud of yourself. Your sister came home and cried for 3 hours. 3 hours, Hadley, in her condition. Call me when you're ready to be an adult about this." In her condition. That's the one. Of everything anybody said that whole spring, that's the one that got in under the plate. Monday, I went to work. I sat down at my desk, and I opened the finding aid I'd been writing for the papers of a woman who died in 1998, and I looked at my own screen for 2 hours and did not do one thing. And somewhere around 11 in the morning, something in me went quiet. Not calm. Quiet. Like a room after the furnace shuts off. I'd been trying to feel my way through it for 8 weeks. Feeling my way through it was killing me. So I stopped feeling, and I started a file. May 18th, Monday, at my desk, on my lunch break. I opened a blank spreadsheet. I am not brave, and I am not clever. I have exactly one skill. When I don't know what a thing is, I stop asking what it means and start asking where it came from. Columns first. Date, time, claim, who said it, where I got it. Can it be checked by someone who is not me? That last column is the whole job. Anybody can say a thing. My work is deciding whether a document survives a stranger. Row 1, March 17th, 10:15 a.m. Dating scan, 8 weeks, 1 day. Source, my own printout, in an envelope in my drawer. Can a stranger check it? No, it's a photograph in a drawer. Row 2, March 24th, 8:36 p.m. Nurse line, source, my phone bill. A stranger can check it, but all it proves is that I dialed a number. Row 3, March 24th, 9:14 p.m. Meredith's text. I looked at row 3 for a long time. Row 4, March 25th, 4:20 a.m. Emergency room, Riverbend Memorial. 4-page discharge summary with my name on every page. That one a stranger can check. That one is real. That one by itself disproves everything my sister said in that ballroom. And it doesn't matter, because here's what I worked out around row 4, with a sandwich I didn't eat. Proving I was pregnant does not clear me. All it does is start an argument about paperwork with people who don't care about paperwork. My mother would look at that discharge summary and say, "Well, obviously, honey, nobody's saying you weren't upset." You cannot win an argument about your character with people who have already voted. So I stopped trying to win it, and I went back to row 3, May 20th, 9 at night, kitchen table, Elliot asleep on the couch with the TV going. I did the thing you can do on any phone in America, and almost nobody does. I put my thumb on the message and dragged it left, and the timestamp came out from behind the edge. Tuesday, March 24th, 2026, 9:14 p.m. Then I built a list. People who knew I was pregnant on March 24th at 9:14 p.m. Me, Elliot, asleep in a cafeteria in Ashland County, and I hadn't called him yet. That's the list. 2 names, and one of them didn't know. Not my mother, not my sister, not one friend, not a coworker. I had followed the rule. So I made a second list. People who knew I was bleeding on March 24th at 9:14 p.m. Me, and a nurse on a phone line who said, "I'm putting a note in your chart, honey." I looked at those 2 lists side by side, and my hands went cold on the table. 9:14 was 36 minutes after I hung up with that nurse. My sister works in the records office of that practice. I'd known that my entire adult life. It's not a secret. It's on her lanyard. It's what my mother brags about. It had been in front of me since the second that message arrived, and I never once put it together. And it isn't stupidity. It's that your brain will hand you 50 explanations before it hands you that one. She guessed. She heard something. Mom told her. You told somebody and forgot. Your brain will do anything rather than tell you that your sister was reading your chart while you sat on a bathroom floor. May 23rd, Saturday. I drove out to Delmar Road and parked across the lot from Heartline Women's Health with a coffee going cold in the holder. I sat there for 40 minutes like a lunatic. At 11:20, she came around the counter with a headset on, laughing at something, one hand on her stomach the way she'd started doing in April, and she leaned over a keyboard and looked at a screen. Just that, a woman at work looking at a screen. I drove home shaking, because that's when I understood what I'd actually been looking at all spring. Not a mean text, not a bad sister, a door. A door that stood open for her all day, every day, into every woman's worst week, including mine. And if she went through it, even once, then somewhere in a building on Delmar Road, a computer wrote it down. That's the thing nobody outside my line of work knows. Every system keeps a log, not because anybody's noble, because logs are cheap. A record system writes a line every time a human being opens a chart. Who, what, when, which machine. It doesn't care. It isn't on anybody's side. My sister's whole life was built on nobody bothering to look. My whole life is looking. May 26th. Tuesday. I took a half day. Here's where I disappoint you, because in a movie, this is where the music starts. What actually happened is I drove to a beige office park in Grandview and sat in a lobby with a fish tank for 50 minutes. The privacy officer for Meridian Health Partners, which owns the practice, is a woman named Halloran, and she has a motivational print about teamwork on her wall. She did not gasp. She did not lean forward. I told her I believed a workforce member with no treatment relationship had accessed my medical record. And I gave her the dates and a written statement I'd typed at home, because I don't trust anybody else's transcription, including mine. She read it. Her face did nothing. We take this very seriously. I said, "Will you tell me what you find? If there's a finding that affects you, you'll receive a written notification." How long? It can take 60 days. She stapled my life to a form, put it in a tray with other forms, and said, "Ma'am, do you need parking validated?" Hear that? Because everybody who's ever told me a story like this has a part where the right person shows up. The kind lawyer, the nurse who says, "I've been waiting for someone to ask." Nobody showed up for me. A woman in a beige office validated my parking. I sat in my car and cried for the first time since March, which tells you which of these things actually broke me. That night, Elliot and I had the worst fight of our marriage, which at that point was 10 days old. He wanted to post the video. He wanted to put my sister on the internet. 4 minutes, he said. 4 minutes and everybody in Heartline knows exactly what she is. I said no. He said, "Why? Give me one reason." And I said the thing I'd been carrying since the ballroom. Because if I'm loud, I'm exactly what she said I was. If I go on the internet screaming, I'm the attention one. She built a box and put my name on it, and every single thing I do that isn't quiet climbs into that box for her. He stood in our kitchen with his hands on top of his head, so angry he was almost crying, and said, "So you're going to do what? Wait for paperwork?" I said yes. And then he said the thing that changed everything. He didn't mean to. He was angry and out of ammunition, so he swung. He said, "Proof of what, Hadley? Proof that you were pregnant, or proof that they knew?" And the kitchen got very quiet. Because I'd been walking around for 8 weeks thinking my problem was that nobody believed I lost a baby. That wasn't my problem. My problem was that my mother stood up in a room full of people and said, out loud, in front of 120 witnesses, that the dangerous thing about that message wasn't what it said. It was when it was sent. My mother had told me the answer, at my wedding, into a microphone. And I had spent 2 months trying to prove the wrong thing. June came in hot and wet the way it does in Ohio. And in June, my sister's story started to move. It's all in the group chat, which my mother had turned into a public record without understanding that's what she was doing. That's the thing about people who've never worked with documents. They think a chat is a conversation. It isn't. It's a ledger. It doesn't forget, and it timestamps every line. April 11th, at the table, due November 15th. April 13th, my mother in the chat. 216 days! My mother counts in days because my mother has run a countdown to something every day for 30 years. Count it forward from April 13th and you land on November 15th. She's never wrong about a date. She was a school secretary. Dates are the one thing she has never in her life gotten wrong. June 2nd, my sister in the chat. 173 days to go. Count that one forward. November 22nd. A week is nothing. A week is a normal thing. And doctors move due dates all the time. They adjust off the early scan, everybody knows that. Except you don't move a due date a week later at 16 weeks, off no appointment, in a group chat, on nothing but a picture she posted in May. The window for redating shuts early. And my sister had not mentioned a single appointment since the announcement. Not one. Not a nurse, not a name, not a doctor. 22 people in that chat, and not one of them had ever heard the name of her OB. She had a bump and a due date and nothing behind either of them. I put it in the spreadsheet. Row 19, claim date, source. Can a stranger check it? No, not yet. And then on June 6th, my mother called me for the first time since the voicemail, and she was warm as toast. Brunch tomorrow, just us. Deirdre's coming. Honey, life's too short. Let's be a family again. Elliot said, don't go. I went. Of course I went. I want to be honest with you about why, and it isn't strategy, and it isn't strength. I went because she's my mother, and it had been 11 weeks, and I wanted her back. I got in the car to go get my mother back. I came home with something else. June 7th, Sunday, 11 in the morning, my parents' house on Bickford Street. My mother had made the quiche with the mushrooms. She hugged me in the doorway for a long time, and I let her, and she smelled like the same hairspray she's used since 1994, and something in my chest tried very hard to be 9 years old. Deirdre was there. My father was out in the yard with the trimmer, which is what my father does when there's a conversation happening in his house. And Meredith was at the table in a yellow sundress, 17 weeks, one hand on top of the bump the whole time the way you do in photographs. My mother said, "We're not going to talk about the wedding." That's it. That's the entire reckoning I got. Deirdre nodded, like a decision had been reached at a meeting, and my mother put a hand on my hand and said, "Life's too short, sweetheart," and served the quiche. For 40 minutes I was fine. I was pleasant. I asked about Deirdre's hip. I told a story about a donor who tried to give my library a box of dirt from a battlefield. My sister laughed at it. We were a family having brunch. And then my mother said, "Hadley, honey, get the creamer, would you?" So I got up and I went to the refrigerator and I opened it and got the creamer and I shut the door. And there it was, 8 inches from my face. Black frame, white mat, on the freezer door at eye level, where my mother put every important document of my childhood. And for the first time since May 3rd, I looked at it. I need you to understand that I didn't see a baby. I'm still ashamed of that, and I still can't help it. Everybody else in this family looked at that picture and saw a baby. I looked at it and saw a document because that's the only thing I've ever been able to see, and it's the reason I'm not in that family anymore, and it's the reason I'm still standing. I saw the crop. The top band was gone. On every scanned printout in this country, there's a band across the top. Practice name, patient name, date of birth, date of the exam. The header. On this one, it was gone, cut off in a hard straight line, the way you'd cut it with the handle in a phone. That's not strange. You'd crop it too. You wouldn't put your birth date on a refrigerator. But an archivist looks at a crop the way a carpenter looks at a miter. It's the first thing you see and you can't stop seeing it. So I was standing there with a carton of half and half in my hand, looking at a cut edge, when my eyes went down and left, into the dark part of the image, where the machine prints the little caption, "The tech types for you." 2 words, that blocky white machine font, all caps. "Hi, Mom." And the kitchen went away. Because I was standing in a room on Delmar Road on March 17th at 10:15 in the morning, listening to a printer chew, watching a woman named Denise reach over and type something into the corner of a picture of my baby while she said, "Congratulations, Mom." I never looked at the printout. Not once. I put it in a sleeve, and I put it in a bag, and I put it in an envelope in a drawer, and I never looked, so I never knew what she typed. 5 weeks. That photograph had been on my mother's refrigerator for 5 weeks, and I had walked past it and stood 2 feet from it, and I had not once been able to make myself look at it. My hands didn't shake. Something in me went so far down and so far away that I got very, very calm. And then my mother was behind me. "Isn't she beautiful?" She had her phone out. She said, "That print doesn't do her justice. The drugstore washes it out. Look at the real one. Look at the nose." And my mother handed me her telephone. Full screen. Bright. 4 times the size of the print. And I stood in my mother's kitchen holding the original file in my hand. Here's what my mother didn't know. Here's what my sister didn't know, and she works in the building. When you crop a picture on a phone, you grab the handle at the top and drag it down over the part you're afraid of. The name. The date. That's what people are afraid of, so that's what they cut. Nobody grabs the bottom. At the bottom of that image was a strip of gray. On a phone, it's nothing. It's a border. It doesn't look like information. It looks like the edge of the picture. It's the footer. It's the machine talking to itself. I read the bottom of images for a living. I read it. And then I handed my mother her phone back, and I heard my own voice say, from a long way off, "She's beautiful." My mother squeezed my arm. She said, "Oh, honey, thank you. That means so much." I ate a second piece of quiche. I helped Deirdre out to her car. I told my sister to text me when she found out what she was having. I drove home doing 35 and a 35. I opened the nightstand drawer and took out an envelope I hadn't opened in 82 days, and my hands were completely steady, and I slid the little paper sleeve out onto the bed. 8 weeks, 1 day, March 17th. 2 words in the corner, "Hi, Mom." And along the bottom edge, a strip of gray with a string of characters in it. Same string. Not similar, not close, the same. That photograph on my mother's refrigerator, the one my aunt cried in front of, the one my father said had his mother's nose in it, the one my mother framed and lit and hung at eye level, is a picture of my baby. They cut my name off the top of my child and hung my baby on the freezer door, and my whole family stood in a half circle in front of that door and cried for 5 weeks. I sat down on the floor at the end of my own bed, and I did not make a sound. And somewhere in there, I don't know how long, I stopped. I stopped trying to prove I hadn't lied. I want you to understand what that felt like, because it was the only good moment in 5 months. For 3 weeks, I had been a woman on trial. I'd been dragging a discharge summary around in a folder like a dog with a permission slip, trying to get 22 people in a group chat to give me back my own name. And on that floor, it just went out of me, all of it, every ounce. Because you can't be on trial for lying about a baby when they have the baby on the refrigerator. I wasn't a defendant anymore. As of 11 o'clock that Sunday morning, I was the only person in Heartline, Ohio, who knew what was actually happening, and the only person who could read the one line that proved it, and not a single one of them had any idea. I've never been in a fight in my life, but I know how to prove where a thing came from. That's all I know. It turns out that was enough. Pause it right here because I still don't know if I did this right. You're on that floor, you know. Do you drive over there tonight and put it on the kitchen table in front of your mother? Or do you sit on it, say nothing, and let them keep going? Tell me in the comments before you hear what I did. I want to know if you'd have been braver than me or just faster. And if you're still here, subscribe. There's a reason my mother was afraid of a timestamp, and I hadn't found it yet. Here's what I did that night instead of driving over there. I sat on my bedroom floor with that printout and ran my own document, the way I'd run anybody's. Where did this come from? Who touched it? Can it survive a stranger? The answer was no. That piece of paper is a photograph in a drawer. It's been in my custody for 82 days, and there's no chain on it. If I walk into my mother's kitchen and slap it on the table next to the frame, I could hear her before it happened. "Well, of course it matches, Hadley. You took a picture of the refrigerator. You printed that at Walgreens like everybody else. Honey, do you hear yourself?" And she'd have been right. That's the sick part. In my own field, I'd have said it too. A copy is not evidence, a copy with a chain is. So around midnight, on my knees on my bedroom floor, I did the most boring thing anybody has ever done for revenge. I looked up the records request policy for Meridian Health Partners. June 12th, 10 in the morning. The release of information office, a window with glass in it in the basement corridor of a medical building, staffed by a man named Marty, with a brown schedule taped to the counter on his side. I said I needed a copy of my ultrasound picture. Marty said, "We don't do pictures." I said, "Excuse me?" He said, "There's no such thing as your picture. There's a study, the imaging study of that date. You want the study? That's a different form." I could kiss Marty on his indifferent head. He didn't know he'd done anything. He's a guy who's had that conversation 4,000 times, and he handed me a form with carbon on the back and pushed a golf pencil under the glass. I filled it out wrong. Twice. The first time, the wrong date range. The second time, I missed the box that mattered, and he pointed at it with the eraser end and said, "You want it certified?" Certified means we attest it's a true copy out of the record. Takes longer, separate charge. I said, "How much longer?" 30 days is the law, usually 2-3 weeks. $6.50, cash. He gave me a receipt out of a machine that prints on that shiny paper that fades. I filed the receipt. On my way back down the corridor to the elevators, my sister came around the corner with a stack of folders and a lanyard swinging. She stopped, I stopped. She looked at the window behind me, and then at me, and I watched something happen in my sister's face that I had never seen in 30 years. She was afraid, not angry, not smug, afraid. I said, "Hi, Meredith," and I got in the elevator. 23 hours, that's how long it took. June 13th, Saturday morning, baby countdown. So my sister came to my work yesterday. She didn't have an appointment. She was in the records hallway. I'm not going to say anything else, but everybody please pray for me because I do not need this stress right now at 18 weeks. Prayer hands. Prayer hands. Deirdre. Oh, honey, no. A woman from my mother's church. Some people can't stand to see anybody else happy. My mother called at 9. Hadley, you went to her work. I said, I went to the records office. It's a public window. I was getting a copy of my own medical record. 2 seconds of nothing. And in those 2 seconds, my mother's voice changed gears, and she said softer, Honey, you need help. I mean that with love. You need to talk to somebody. I said, Mom, why do you care that I got a copy of my own record? And my mother, who has never once been at a loss for the next sentence, who ran the front office of a school with 600 children in it, said nothing. For 4 seconds, I counted. I count now. That's what she made me into. Then she said, Your father wants to talk to you, and hung up. June 16th, Tuesday evening, my father's truck in my driveway. Wayne Prentice sat at my kitchen table with his hands around a can of pop like it was a wren and would not look at me. He talked about the Reds for 6 minutes. 6. Then he said, I want you to write your sister a letter. I said, a letter. He said, an apology. Doesn't have to be a whole thing. For the wedding. For all this. Put it in writing so your mother can show it around and we put it behind us. So your mother can show it around. He said it and he didn't even hear himself. I said, Dad, do you know what she said about me in front of 120 people? And my father said, and it's the most honest thing he has ever said to me, Hadley, I gave that girl $18,400 for that nursery. I told every man at the lodge, Bob Hazlitt's wife knit a blanket. It's out of the barn. You understand me? It's out of the barn. Not, is it true? Not, are you okay? Not, what happened to you in March? It's out of the barn. He wasn't defending my sister. He has never defended my sister in his life. He was defending Wayne in front of a jury of men in a lodge hall who will never know they were the jury. I said no. He put the can on my counter, and at the door he turned around and said, You've always needed to be the story. And he drove away, and I stood in my kitchen and thought, with something like wonder, he doesn't know. My father does not know. They didn't tell him. He's been walking around this town for 2 months paying for a nursery, and my mother and my sister did not tell him. That was the first crack, not in them, in my picture of them. Up until that minute, I'd thought of it as a family. It wasn't. It was 2 people, and a man they'd rented a voice from. June 19th. The videographer's raw files landed in my inbox. 11 gigabytes, a folder called Prentice-Vance_raw. I hadn't watched a single frame of my wedding. Elliot watched it first. At midnight, headphones on. I went to bed. At 2 a.m, I woke up and the living room light was on, and he was sitting there with the laptop closed and his hand over his mouth. He said, Don't watch it. Which is how I knew. June 20th, 6 a.m. I made coffee and sat down and watched my own wedding like it was an accession. That's a real thing we do. When a collection comes in on video, you don't watch it. You scrub it. Frame by frame at the moments that matter, because you're not looking for the story. You're looking for what's in the corner of the story. Camera B was on a tripod at the back of the ballroom on a wide shot, running the whole time. It never blinked. It never got bored. It never took a side. It is the only honest thing that was in that room. Here is what is on camera B. Time code 20 hours, 31 minutes, 14 seconds. My sister says the word faked. Time code 20 hours, 31 minutes, 11 seconds. 3 seconds earlier. 3 seconds before the word, in the bottom right of the frame, at table 1, my mother's arm comes up. She's already standing. Her glass is already at her shoulder. She stood up during the sentence before it. I ran those 9 seconds back 40 times. My mother did not react to my sister. You react in a half second. You flinch. You put your hand over your mouth. You look at the person next to you to see if you heard it right. 120 people did exactly that on camera B. You can watch the whole room do it at once like wind on a field. My mother rose during the setup line, brought her glass to her shoulder, and waited. She was on her cue. You cannot be shocked 3 seconds before a sentence. She wasn't standing up to defend her daughter. She was standing up to catch her. For 2 months, I'd told this story in my head as my mother made a terrible choice in a terrible moment. She panicked. She took the wrong side in 4 seconds. 4 seconds. Even the story I'd built about my own life was wrong. It was -3. And once I saw that, I picked up the other thing. The thing I'd filed away on May 15th and never looked at again. A hallway by the restrooms at a steakhouse off the interstate. My mother with an index card in her hand, my sister reading it. Toast practice, don't you dare look. My mother has written the toasts in this family for 30 years. Blue ballpoint, 3x5 cards, because that's what the front office had. I have a shoebox of them. She wrote the one my father read at my grandfather's funeral, and he cried, and everybody said, "Oh, Wayne, that was beautiful." Wayne didn't write that. My sister didn't write that toast either. My sister has never written anything in her life. The words that ended my wedding were composed in blue ballpoint by a woman who spent 29 years deciding what day things happen on. She handed them to my sister in a hallway. Then she stood up on her cue and raised a glass to her own work. Someone had to say it, honey. She meant it literally. That's what I understood at 6 in the morning on my own couch. It wasn't a slogan, it was a stage direction. Someone had to say it, so she picked someone. June 24th. The window, Marty, not ready. 10 more business days on the certified ones, they go out for attestation. I said okay. I sat in my car in the heat with my hands on the wheel and laughed until I had to put my head down. That's what nobody tells you. It isn't a chase, it's a line. June 30th. My phone rang from a number in Grandview. The privacy office, not Halloran, a man, very careful, who wanted a supplemental statement. Would I confirm the date and approximate time of my call to the nurse line on March 24th? Would I confirm I had not authorized any family member to access my record? Would I confirm I had never worked for the practice? 10 minutes. He thanked me for my time and would not answer a single question. I said, "Have you found something?" And he said, "Ma'am, I'm not able to characterize an open review." He didn't have to characterize anything. You do not do a supplemental statement on nothing. I hung up and sat very still because I'd just learned the only fact that mattered. Somewhere in that building, a person had looked at a log. And 2 days later, everything in my family started moving early. That's the tell. That was always the tell, and I'd looked at it my whole life without seeing it. July 2nd, Thursday. Baby countdown, 8:12 in the morning. My mother. Change of plans. Meredith's shower is moving up to Saturday the 11th at our house, 2 p.m. Deirdre's flying to Tucson in August, and we are not doing this without her. Same registry. Sorry for the short notice. You know me. Sorry for the short notice. You know me. The shower had been on the calendar for August 2nd for 6 weeks, and Deirdre's flight to Tucson was on the 18th of August. I knew that because I'm the one who found her the fare. My wedding moved 4 days after I lost my baby. The shower moved 2 days after a man from the privacy office made a phone call. My mother does not move dates because dates move. My mother moves the date when something is coming, and she gets everybody in a room and out of a room before it can get there. That's what 29 years in a front office teaches you. Whoever holds the calendar decides what has happened yet. I stood in my kitchen with my phone in my hand and thought, she's early because she's scared, and she's scared before anybody's told her anything. Which means she has always known there was something to be scared of. That afternoon, Marty slid a manila envelope under the glass and said, "ID?" I sat in the parking lot of a medical building on Delmar Road in 90-degree heat with the engine off, and I opened it. Letterhead. Meridian Health Partners. A cover page saying, in language written by a lawyer, that the attached is a true and complete copy of the designated record set for the patient named below, produced from the legal medical record on July 2nd, 2026. Signed and stamped. A real stamp, ink, pressed crooked by a human hand. Prentice, Hadley R. And there was the image. My baby. Hi Mom in the corner, and across the top, restored, the whole header they'd cut off, my name, my birth date, my record number, the date, the practice. And along the bottom, in the gray strip, the string. I already knew what it was going to say. I'd read it on my mother's telephone in her kitchen 25 days earlier, and I hadn't been able to unknow it for 1 minute since. I read it anyway, it matched. I sat in that car long enough that a woman in scrubs knocked on my window to ask if I was all right, and I said yes, and I meant it. And that was the strangest part of the whole spring. I had a document with the chain on it. It came out of their system, not mine. Certified by them, at my request, under a federal law that says a patient can have her own record and nobody gets a vote. My sister's plan had exactly one flaw in it. She stole from the only woman in Ohio who could ask for the original back. July 5th, Sunday. I called my mother. It's the only thing I have ever done in my life that I'd call cold. She answered on the second ring with her voice already braced, and I said, "Mom, I'm sorry." You could hear her sit down. I said all of it. I'd been in a bad place since March. I'd made the wedding about me, and that wasn't fair to Meredith. I'd gone to her work, and I could see how that looked, and I was ashamed. I said, I think I need to be around people who are happy instead of hiding from them. And my mother started to cry, real crying. It was worse than I expected, because she was so happy, and she said, "Oh, Hadley, oh, my girl, oh, thank God," 3 times. Then she said, "You come to the shower, Saturday. You sit up front with me." I said, "Mom, can I ask for one thing?" She said, "Anything." I said, "You always do a slideshow. You've done one at every single thing this family has ever had." She laughed wetly and said, "Well, somebody has to." I said, "Put her scan in it, the one on the fridge. I couldn't look at it in May. I want to look at it now. I want to see it big with everybody, and I want to be done being the person who can't look." My mother was quiet for 2 seconds. Then she said, "That is the sweetest thing you have ever said to me." She'd put it right after the picture of Meredith at 4 in the plastic pool. She'd have Wayne hook the laptop to the big TV, the 65-inch, because the projector bulb's going. She said, "Honey, it's going to be beautiful." I said, "Thank you, Mom." And I hung up and put the phone on the counter and stood in my kitchen shaking so hard I had to hold the edge of the sink. Elliot was in the doorway. He'd heard all of it. He said very quietly, "Hadley, what did you just do?" I said, "I asked my mother to put it on the biggest screen in the house. It's the only defense I've got, and I've turned it over every day since. I didn't lie to her. Listen to it again. Every word of it was true. I had been in a bad place. I did want to look at it with everybody. I did want to be done being the person who couldn't look." That's the thing my family never understood. They thought I was the honest one because I was the boring one. They never worked out that those are the same skill. July 6th, Monday. The mail. A plain white envelope with a plastic window and a return address in Grandview. It looks exactly like a bill. I nearly put it on the pile. 2 pages. I won't read you all of it. It's written the way those are written. "We are writing to inform you. We regret. Out of an abundance of caution." But there's a paragraph in the middle where the lawyer language stops and the machine starts talking, and I'll be able to say it on the day I die. Our review identified that on the following dates and times, your electronic medical record was accessed by a workforce member who did not have a treatment, payment, or healthcare operations relationship with your care. March 24th, 2026, at 8:51 p.m., April 29th, 2026, at 11:06 a.m., during which an imaging study dated March 17th, 2026 was retrieved and exported to removable media. May 11th, 2026, at 4:22 p.m. 3 lines, 3 timestamps, nobody's opinion, nobody's memory, no sister, no mother, no 120 people deciding what kind of woman I am. Just a machine that wrote down what happened, because logs are cheap. Do the arithmetic with me. I did it standing in my driveway with the mailbox still hanging open. March 24th. I hang up with the nurse at 8:38. She types her note. At 8:51, 13 minutes later, somebody with no reason to be in my chart opens my chart. At 9:14, 23 minutes after that, my phone lights up on the sink with my sister's name on it. "Don't make this a whole thing. You weren't even far enough along to tell anybody." She wasn't guessing. She was reading. She sat somewhere in this town with my chart open on a screen and watched me lose my baby in real time. And the only thing that moved her to pick up a phone, the only thing in the worst 4 hours of my life, was the fear that I might tell our mother something before she was ready for me to. April 29th, 11:06 in the morning. Lunchtime, more or less. Somebody opened my chart, pulled the picture of my son or my daughter out of a hospital system, and put it on a thumb drive. She didn't go hunting. She opened the chart she'd already been reading for 5 weeks. Mine was the one whose number she knew by heart. That isn't a mastermind picking a target. That's a woman on her lunch break, reaching for the nearest thing on the shelf. 4 days later, it was in a black frame on my mother's freezer door, and Deirdre was crying at it. And May 11th, 4:22 in the afternoon. I couldn't work that one out at first. Nothing happened on May 11th. May 11th was a Monday. May 11th was nothing. May 11th was the day I called the practice at 4 in the afternoon and asked a stranger, in the flattest voice I own, to please take me off the recall list, because I wasn't pregnant anymore and the letters kept coming. And she said, "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. Let me note the account." She noted the account. At 4:22, somebody opened my chart. 5 days later, my sister took a microphone at my wedding. I sat down on my own porch step. I thought I was closing a door. I called to make the mail stop because a brochure with a stork on it was killing me one Monday at a time. The saddest, smallest thing I have ever done. And it went into a system, and my sister read the words, and what she saw was, Hadley is touching the records. From her side, the woman she'd stolen from had just picked up the phone and called the department she stole from. She had 5 days, and she had 120 witnesses coming to a ballroom on Saturday, so she didn't wait for me to find out. She stood up first and told everybody I was the one who makes things up. That's not a cruel sister, that's a fire door. You don't burn your sister down in front of 120 people because you're jealous of her wedding. You do it because she's 4 inches from the only thing that can end you, and you need her already discredited when she gets there. My mother helped her do it in blue ballpoint. July 9th, Thursday, 2 days out. I wasn't looking for it. I was looking for the videographer's contract because I wanted to be sure I owned that raw footage outright before I ever thought about what happened to it. The wedding binder, my handwriting, tabs, and the tab in front of the videographer's tab is Lyndon Muir. I hadn't read a page of it since March. Who reads their own wedding invoices after the wedding? Page 1. The October 3rd contract signed the summer before. Deposit, $1,500. Page 2, a cancellation letter for the October 3rd booking from the Lindenmere's event office, dated April 2nd. Page 3, the May 16th contract. Deposit, $1,500. New. A second deposit, not a transfer, not a credit, not the old rate honored, a brand new deposit on a brand new card, signed by C. Prentice. And in the corner of the invoice, in 6-point type, in the part of the page nobody on this earth reads except me, hold placed March 28, 2026. March 28th. My mother put a hold on that ballroom on March 28th and called me an hour later to tell me a room had opened up. And the October date, the one she said we'd lose, the one she said Grandma Ruth might not live to see, was still ours on March 28th. Nobody canceled it until April 2nd, 5 days after she'd already booked the new one. There was no cancellation at the Lindenmere. Nothing opened up. Nothing had to. That ballroom had been sitting empty the whole time because nobody gets married in a downtown hotel in the middle of May in Ohio, and my mother knew it because my mother has been booking rooms in this town for 30 years. She didn't take a cancellation. She created one 5 days later on my October wedding. And Grandma Ruth, who was slipping, who might not live to see October, Grandma Ruth is 88, and in 2 days she will drive herself to that shower. She wasn't slipping. She was a reason. I sat on my bedroom floor with that invoice in my hands, 3/4 of the way to it, and I could not get the last quarter. Why that date? What's different about May 16th? Meredith wasn't showing in May. Fine. She'd have been 8 months along in October, and no pad on earth survives 8 months as maid of honor. That's real. That's a reason. But it didn't sit right because my mother booked that room on March 28th, and on March 28th, nobody in that family had heard the word pregnant out of my sister's mouth. She didn't announce until April 11th, 2 weeks later. So on March 28th, officially, there was no baby to hide. What was there on March 28th? Me. 4 days out from a bathroom floor, not answering my phone. There was a woman in that family who was destroyed. And I had it in my hands and I still couldn't see it. I've had people tell me since that I'm some kind of mastermind. I'm not. I had every piece of it on the floor around me on July 9th, and the last one didn't land until Saturday afternoon. And it didn't land because I was clever. It landed because I watched my mother run. July 10th, Friday night. Elliot at the kitchen table, watching me put one manila envelope into a canvas tote bag with a library logo on it. He said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "Nothing." He said, "Hadley." I said, "I'm not going to argue with anybody. I'm not going to raise my voice because the second I raise my voice, I'm the girl she said I was." He said, "Then what?" I put the tote on the chair and said, "I'm going to ask a question." July 11th, Saturday, 2 in the afternoon, 91 degrees, and my mother had the air on so high the windows sweated. 40 people in the house on Bickford Street. A diaper cake on the buffet with a stork made out of a rolled washcloth. Sandwiches with the crusts off, and that punch my mother makes with the sherbet melting in it that I've loved since I was 6. And God help me, I had 2 cups. My mother met me in the door and held my face in both hands the way she'd held Meredith's in April and said, "My girl came." Deirdre hugged me and cried. Deirdre cries at everything. She had her readers on a chain around her neck because she'd been working the registry list, and she said, "Now you sit by me." My sister was in a blue dress in a chair with a bow taped to it. 22 weeks, ankles up on a footstool. When she saw me, she went white for half a second and then recovered because of course my mother had told her, and she put out her hand and said, "Hadley, thank you for coming." I said, "You look beautiful." I had one bad minute in that house and that was it. Because she does look beautiful and she's my sister, and I was 6 once and she taught me to ride a bike on that street. I sat down next to my aunt with a canvas library tote on the floor between my feet. Then they did the games. There's one where you guess how big around she is with a piece of string. Sit inside that a second. 40 people cut lengths of yarn and took turns wrapping them around my sister's waist, and everybody laughed, and my father laughed loudest, and I sat there with a paper cup of sherbet punch. Then my mother clapped her hands twice, the front office clap, the one that ends recess in 600 children, and said, "All right, everybody in, Wayne the TV." My father had the laptop cabled to the 65-inch. He'd figured it out himself, and he told 2 men about it. The lights went off. 40 adults sat down on folding chairs my mother had borrowed from her church, facing a television the size of a door. And my mother narrated. She's genuinely good at this. Meredith at 4 in a plastic pool, Meredith at 11 in a cheerleading uniform, my grandmother holding Meredith on the day she was born in that hospital gown they don't make anymore, and Deirdre said, "Oh, Mama," out loud in the dark. And then my mother said, "And now, the newest apprentice." And it filled the screen. 65 inches, corner to corner, edge to edge, blown up so big that the grain of it broke into blocks. And the room made that sound. That low, warm 40 people at once, "Aw." And somebody said, "Look at that little nose." And my mother stood beside the television, with one hand resting on the frame of it, lit sideways by a picture of my baby. Sorry, give me a second. The header was gone, cut clean off the top the way it had been since April. And along the bottom of that screen, blown up to 4 inches tall, in gray on gray, sat a strip of characters. On a phone, it's a shadow. On a phone, it is nothing at all. On a 65-inch television, it's a sentence. I put my cup down on the carpet and stood up. Not fast. I didn't want anybody's adrenaline. I stood the way you stand to get more punch, and my mother turned and smiled at me because she thought, and I will carry this the rest of my life, she thought I was going to say something nice. I said, "Aunt Deirdre, you've got your readers on. Can you read the bottom line on that screen? The gray part at the very bottom. Just read it out loud." The room laughed a little. It was a strange thing to ask. Somebody said, "What?" My mother's face did nothing yet. Deirdre put her glasses up on her nose and leaned forward and squinted at that television, and she read it out in the voice of a 66-year-old woman reading a phone number off a card. ACC 031726 -091338. I said thank you. And then I took a manila envelope out of my tote and 2 pages out of the envelope, and I walked 6 feet across my mother's living room in the dark with a television lighting up the side of my face, and I put those pages in my aunt's hands. I said, "Now read the bottom of that one." She held it under the light of the screen. She read it slower this time. I don't think she knew why yet. I think her voice did before she did. ACC 031726 -091338. Nobody moved. A folding chair creaked. That's the only sound in my memory of the next 4 seconds. A chair. I said, "Aunt Deirdre, read the top of that page, out loud, just the top." And my Aunt Deirdre, who had cried in front of that refrigerator in May, who cries at commercials, read the top of a certified copy of a medical record out loud in my mother's living room with 40 people behind her in the dark. It says, "Meridian Health Partners, certified true copy of the designated record set. Patient Prentice Hadley R." She stopped. She said, "Hadley, this is you." I said, "Keep going, Aunt Deirdre. One more line." "Study date," she said, "ultrasound OB March 17th, 2026. I said, "That's the same number as the picture on the television." And then I said, the only other thing I said in that whole house, and I said it to the room, and not to anyone in particular, and my voice didn't do anything at all. A machine gives a number to one exam, on one patient, on one day, and it never gives that number out again, and the first 6 digits of it are the date, 031726, March 17th. I said, "Meredith posted that picture in the family chat on May 2nd at 6:41 in the evening and told 22 people it was her 12-week scan. Everybody in this room can scroll up and look. You don't need me. Scroll up." 40 heads turned to the television at the same time. I'd seen that once before on camera B at 8:31 at night on the 16th of May. a whole room moving at once like wind across a field. And 6 or 7 people took out their phones. And my mother ran. She didn't say a word. That's the thing. My mother, who has an answer for everything, who has never in 61 years been without the next sentence, my mother came off the wall and went for that television with both hands. She got the cable, she yanked it out of the laptop, and the screen went to that flat blue nothing with a box in the corner that says, "No signal," and it lit her up standing there with a cord in her fist and her chest going. 40 people watched my mother run at a television. You know what I did? Nothing. I stood in the dark. I didn't have to do one more thing for the rest of my life. I'd already done all of it. Because if it's Meredith's baby, you don't run at the screen. If it's Meredith's baby, you say, "Hadley, that's ridiculous." And you laugh. And your daughter says, "Mom, get her out of here." And everybody goes back to the punch. Instead, a 61-year-old woman in a linen dress got across a room in 3 steps to make it stop. And my sister sat in a chair with a bow taped to it, and she did not open her mouth. Not once. Not one word. Not, "You're lying." Not, "How dare you?" Not, "Mom, what is she talking about?" 22 weeks pregnant, allegedly, and just accused in front of 40 people of hanging her sister's dead baby on the freezer door, and my sister looked at the carpet. Everyone in that room saw both of those things. They saw the one who ran and the one who said nothing, and there is not a person alive who needs a lawyer to explain that to them. My father said, "Turn the lights on." Nobody did. He said it again, and his voice cracked in the middle of it, and Bob Hazlitt got up and did it. And then it was just a bright room with 40 people in folding chairs and a diaper cake. Deirdre was still holding the pages. She looked at them, and she looked at the black TV, and she looked at my sister, and my aunt said the sentence that ended my family. Not me. I never said it. I want that on the record. I never asked it. Deirdre said, "Meredith, honey, where's your scan?" My sister said nothing. Deirdre said, "Sweetheart, they'd have given you one. Where is it?" And my mother said, and this is the last thing my mother ever said to me, and I think it might be the truest sentence she has ever produced. "This is a private family matter." 40 people heard that. 40 people had just watched a woman run at a television, and they heard, "This is a private family matter," and I watched it land on every face in that room in the same second. That's when I picked up my bag. And that's when the last piece came. And it didn't come from a document. It came from watching her stand there with that cord in her hand. I said, "Mom, one question and I'll go. When did you book the Lindenmere?" She didn't answer. I said, "March 28th, 4 days after I lost my baby. 2 weeks before anybody in this house had heard the word pregnant come out of Meredith's mouth. There was no cancellation, Mom. October was still ours until April 2nd. You didn't take a cancellation. You made one." She didn't answer that either. She has still never answered it. And standing there, I finally understood what my mother had actually done. And it isn't what you think. And it isn't what I thought. She didn't move my wedding because Meredith would have been showing in October. That's not it. That's what I thought all week. She moved it because of me. On March 28th, my mother knew, from a screen in a records office 20 minutes down Delmar Road, that her younger daughter had just lost a baby, and she knew exactly what that woman was going to be like for the next few months. She'd know. She's my mother. She knew I'd go quiet and agreeable, and I would not look directly at anything. And she knew there was a window, a few months maybe, where you could hang a photograph of my own child on the freezer door at my eye level, and I would walk past it every Sunday, and I would never, ever look. And she knew that window closes. Grief has a half-life. Sooner or later I was going to lift my head, and I read the bottoms of pictures for a living. So she needed the trial held while my grief was still radioactive. That's why my wedding moved. My mother scheduled 120 witnesses around the half-life of my grief, and she did it in her front office voice on a Saturday morning, 4 days after the worst night of my life, and she told me a room had opened up. I walked out through 40 people. Nobody stopped me. Bob Hazlitt's wife touched my arm. Elliot was at the curb with the engine running. He'd been out there an hour and 11 minutes with the AC on, waiting for me to either come out or scream. If you've got somebody in your life who moves the date on you and calls it a favor, hit subscribe. And tell me one thing in the comments. What's the thing your family scheduled around you and called good news? I didn't scream in the car. I didn't cry either. What I did was ask Elliot to stop at the Speedway on Delmar, and I bought a Diet Coke, and I drank the whole thing in the parking lot with the door open and my feet on the pavement. Today is Wednesday. That was 4 days ago. Here's where it stands, and it's less than you want and more than I expected. Monday morning, my sister was put on administrative leave. Tuesday afternoon, she wasn't on leave anymore. She doesn't work at Heartline Women's Health, and she won't work anywhere like it again in this county because the thing she did goes in a file with her name on it, and every clinic on this side of the state calls the last one before they hire. None of that happened because of Saturday. People keep telling me I destroyed my sister in a living room. I didn't. Saturday was a slideshow. The review had been running since May 26th, since a woman named Halloran validated my parking. It was always going to land. Saturday just meant 40 people found out the same week the compliance department did. And it didn't stop at me. It couldn't. When they audit one person snooping, they audit all of it. And a woman I went to high school with put a photo of her own letter on Facebook Sunday night with the words, "Does anybody else have this?" My sister sat at that desk for 4 years. She didn't learn to steal a scan on the day she needed one. There is no baby. There was never going to be a November. Nobody said it out loud. My family would rather stand in a house fire than say a sentence. But nobody's buying a car seat either. My father called Monday night, 11 minutes. He talked about the Reds for the first 2. Then he said, "Hadley, are you going to make this official?" That's what he asked. Not, "Are you all right?" Not, "Was that my grandchild on your mother's refrigerator?" Not, "What happened to you in March?" I said, "Dad, it's already official. It's been official since May. That's what official means." He said, "Well," and then nothing for 8 seconds, and then, "Your mother's not doing good." I told him I loved him, and I hung up. Baby Countdown had 22 people in it Saturday morning. By Sunday night, it had 5. My mother deleted it Monday. And here's the part I didn't see coming, and neither did she. Nobody in that family is talking about Meredith. They're talking about Carol. Deirdre hasn't spoken to my mother since Saturday. Her own sister. Bob Hazlitt's wife mailed the blanket back to the house. Knitted herself, 4 months, mailed it back. Because everybody understands a liar. Every family's got one. What people will not forgive, and I've watched it now, is the woman who knew and stood up and raised her glass and said someone had to say it, honey. Meredith did it. My mother certified it. I'm not suing anybody, and it isn't grace. I don't have any grace. It's that a lawsuit puts me in a room explaining my march to strangers for 2 years, and my march isn't for them. It's mine. It's the only thing left that's mine. I filed one complaint with the federal office that handles this. Online, 9 minutes. Then I closed the laptop. We're not going back to Bickford Street. No contact. Not a dramatic one. I didn't send a letter. I don't have a speech. I just don't go. If my mother wants to know how I am, she can look at a calendar since that's the only language she was ever fluent in and count the days. There's one more thing. The certified copy came home in a canvas tote bag with a library logo on it. 2 pages. $6.50 and 20 days and everything I had. I bought a frame at the drugstore. Black wood, white matte, $11. It's on my refrigerator. I didn't crop it. My name is across the top of it, all of it. Prentice, Hadley R., date of birth, record number, March 17th, 2026, 10:15 in the morning, and the gray strip is still along the bottom where the machine put it, with a number in it that belongs to one exam, on one patient, on one day, forever. And in the corner, in the dark part, where a woman named Denise typed it while a printer was chewing, in that blocky little machine font, "Hi, Mom." It took me 82 days to look at that. 82 days, and then a stranger's television, and then a woman with her readers on a chain reading a number out loud in the dark. My mother was right about one thing, and she was so right about it that she came out of a chair in front of 120 people to stop it. It was never about what my sister wrote. It was about when she wrote it. Everything in my family has a when on it. The text, the hold on the ballroom, the countdown in days, the glass 3 seconds early. They just never thought anybody would read the bottom.